Welcome back to the BlackTrack, where I do commentary and review on movies with an all-black cast or at least a black lead. Merry Christmas! I hope everybody is enjoying the holidays. I know I am. It's my favorite time of the year, and it's been a very good year for the BlackTrack. Today's movie is not only a Christmas movie, but for the first time on the channel, it's also a religious movie. I'm talking about The Preacher's Wife, a 1996 film directed by Penny Marshall, who's also known for directing classics such as Big and A League of Their Own. It's one of those rare black movies that's directed by a white person, but that does nothing to change the quality or the soul of the film. The movie is actually a remake of a 1947 film called The Bishop's Wife. The Preacher's Wife tells the story of a preacher, played by Courtney B. Vance, who's being stretched too thin and struggling to hold his church and family together. He prays for help and gets it in the form of an angel named Dudley, played by Denzel Washington. Those two actors are heavy hitters in the game, but that's not really why people went to see The Preacher's Wife in '96. Who people really wanted to see was Whitney Houston. She is the eponymous preacher's wife after all, but not only that, she was at the height of her musical and acting career around this time, after starring in Waiting to Exhale the previous year, and still eating off the Bodyguard soundtrack, which sold a staggering 45 million copies worldwide. I'ma say that again, 45 million albums sold. There's not even a classification for that. Needless to say, she was a huge star at the time, and the movie needed all the help it could get because its production was cursed. A building next door caught fire next to the church they were using, killing 2 kids and injuring another. An old woman fell and died in the church the movie was filmed in a few days before they started production, and a crew member was hit by a car and killed while crossing the street. And that's just the start of the problems. Needless to say, there was a miracle needed in and outside of this movie. Despite all of that adversity, did The Preacher's Wife manage to pull off the miracle of a good film in 1996 and 2022? Let's BlackTrack and find out.
What you are about to see is true. The names have not been changed because nobody believes me anyway.
I never thought I would say this, but this is making me miss Miles from Soul Food. Do you know how bad you have to be for that to happen? It's a kid though, so I'll cut him some slack. Dude probably could barely read when this movie came out. And check it out, the missionary of mothers is in full effect in this movie, because not only does it star Jennifer Lewis, but also Loretta Devine. That acronym says mom too, if you didn't notice. If you need a mother, the missionary has you covered. You can call it typecasting all you want, but it's hard to come by a good black movie mom in Hollywood. This struggling church is led by the Reverend Henry Biggs, played by Courtney B. Vance, and the B must stand for Bassett, because if you ever wondered who was the lucky mystery dude who's been with Angela Bassett all these years, well, you're looking at him, and he and his 1980s mustache is looking back at you like, you damn right. In this movie, he's inherited the church from the father of his wife, Julia, played by Whitney Houston. You would think he would do everything in his power to distance himself from that fact, but he's so bad at this that he starts plagiarizing his father-in-law's sermons. Julia and her mother notices, and Julia encourages the choir to put a little more spirit into it.
But God knows.
God knows!
No wonder the church is failing. I'm actually confused as to why the church is doing so bad though, because this place is packed.
Look at this husband. $96 and a butt.
Well, that'll do it. In fairness, the neighborhood is going through it at the moment, and they expect Pastor Biggs to be here to deal with all of it. He's got to reassure the neighborhood kids that they'll have a place to go after school when the local real estate guy tears everything down. He's got to provide moral support and legal representation to a troubled guy who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He's got to explain to his son why his best friend is going to a foster home. And he's got to keep the church from literally falling apart. The man is tired, not just physically, but also tired of y'all shit. And it's funny, because he prayed for help, not even really expecting to get it. And when help does show up in the form of an angel named Dudley, played by Denzel Washington, the good reverend doesn't even believe it.
Look, I don't know who you are.
Dudley. I'm Dudley.
Or who put you up to this.
He did.
But I'm afraid you picked the wrong day for me to be a good sport. Now, will you excuse me?
Sure.
Thank you.
Wow.
It is somewhat weird and a little ironic that a pastor doesn't believe in all the stories that he's preaching. But it does tie into the story by showing that Pastor Biggs has lost a little faith with all of the crap that he has to deal with. The thing that stands out to me is that Dudley is so happy to be on Earth. Look at this dude. I'm a little confused, because sending him here seems like a punishment to me. Isn't heaven supposed to be like a paradise? He looks like he couldn't wait to get away from it. If you've noticed, I haven't mentioned much about Julia. That's because for a movie called The Preacher's Wife, the actual preacher's wife takes a bit of a backseat to everything else going on. Whitney Houston is relegated to mostly musical numbers and back and forth banter with her mother Marguerite, played by Jennifer Lewis. And I have no idea why it's written that way. Part of the reason might be because Whitney Houston didn't even want to do the movie in the first place and had to be talked into it. Her reasons for not wanting to do it, you ask? Well, she said when she read the script, she couldn't see herself playing a church wife opposite a goody two-shoes reverend. She said she normally goes for the bad boys, and she wouldn't be realistic in that role. Although that last part is definitely true. That's why they call it acting, Whitney Houston. I'm sure you didn't really go for white guys in real life either, but that didn't stop you from cashing them bodyguard checks. It's very obvious on screen too, because her and Courtney B. Vance's chemistry sucks. But in a weird way, it works, because they have a struggling marriage in the movie, so they're supposed to be standoffish. Older women just love Denzel Washington, don't they? Or I guess I should say, they love men who look like Denzel Washington, because wherever Dudley goes, he's just welcomed in with open arms. Shows up at the church, secretary just lets him right on in. Shows up at Reverend Biggs' house while he's not there, they not only barely question him, but Marguerite is acting like her water just got turned back on. Bet that bill ain't been paid in ages. God didn't send Dudley down here completely useless. He has some small-scale angel powers, like fixing things that are broken and being able to do Holy Ghost mind tricks on people that he touches. The trick is they have to be believers though. It didn't work on the Reverend either, because see, he's the person who did the prayer, and that would be too easy. His fix has to be on his own free will. It says so in Dudley's handbook for the recently deceased. Oh yeah, he has a handbook that's supposed to give him rules and guidance about the world, but it's so damn vague. Not to get too religious about all this, but I just don't get it. You're supposed to work for somebody who knows everything about everything, and you get sent down here with something that reads like stereo instructions. Dudley is also really hands-off about all this, and it's not real clear exactly how he's supposed to be helping the Reverend if all he does is follow him around everywhere. Reverend Biggs meets with the real estate guy who wants to buy his church named Joe Hamilton, played by Gregory Hines. And hey, I just realized, this movie is like a Coming to America / Waiting to Exhale mini reunion. You got Paul Bates and Sherry Hadley on the Coming to America side, and you've got Loretta Devine, Gregory Hines, Whitney Houston, and Angela Bassett's husband on the Waiting to Exhale side. Man, black actors were all over the place back then. Old Joe Hamilton here is willing to offer the Reverend all kinds of amenities in a new church if he's willing to sell the old one. He'll even throw in a new boiler in the meantime. The stuff he offers him sounds more like a country club than a church.
Henry, look at this. Daycare facilities.
We need that.
Senior Citizens Club.
It's much better than ours.
With TV cameras and lighting built right in.
Look at that.
Is a pulpit to preach to the world.
Although, in perspective, if you want to get people to come to the church, every synopsis you read about this movie, it says that Dudley comes to Earth and falls in love with the preacher's wife. I feel like that's a little misleading. He does begin spending way more time with her than the Reverend, but it's more him trying to fix their marriage than win her love. Also, the movie is real vague and intentionally subtle about whether they're actually falling for each other or not. Actually, the movie is kind of vague and weird about a lot of things. For instance, the Reverend ditches Julia to go tend to a sick church member, and he suggests that Dudley take her instead, which by the way, once again, stranger danger. But when they get to the lounge, this guy that Julia knows from way back, played by Lionel Richie, comes over and starts damn near drooling all over her. I swore to all things holy that this dude was hitting on her like she was one of his old freaks or something. And the movie even plays it up like a tense situation between him and Dudley too. But then, nothing. He just wanted her to sing. All of this lead up was just for another song. I even went back to check to make sure that Dudley didn't put one of his spells on him. Everything interesting that happens to Julia in this movie just comes down to a setup for her to sing. They might as well have just made it a musical and got it over with. The music is great though, so I'm not complaining at all. I mean, if you manage to get arguably the greatest singer of all time, you might as well use her, right? Despite it being his idea in the first place, Reverend Biggs is not pleased with the idea that his wife and Dudley had a good time, and he's about had enough of this real life revival. They were ready for him though. and had 2 good shots loaded in the chamber and formed against him just in case he had something to say. And oh yes, they did prosper.
Henry, we had fun. Remember what that used to be?
I don't believe this entire situation.
No, you don't. That's your trouble right there. Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't believe in much of anything anymore, do you, Henry? You don't believe in me, you don't believe in yourself.
That's more or less the theme of this movie. The Reverend has lost all faith and doesn't really believe in anything anymore. He's just going through the motions and doing what everybody expects him to do. And only now is he realizing it when he thinks somebody is about to take his woman. Like I said earlier, it's just way too much going on in The Preacher's Wife. And as we've learned by now, when you have a lot going on, you got to find time to have a lot of resolutions to tie it all up. A good portion of the movie is dedicated to this guy Billy Eldridge, who was arrested for being in the wrong place at the wrong time and mistaken as a robber. The Reverend helped him get out of trouble before, but is not so sure he wants to help him now. After Dudley puts him in his place, what follows is quite the spectacle, I gotta say. Reverend Biggs barges into the courtroom and gives possibly the best sermon of his life to the judge and actually gets the guy off. Holy sh**.
Now it's up to you to judge not his past, but his future, not his failures, but his dreams, not his imperfections, but his possibilities.
Hallelujah.
I think I speak for everybody when I say that we owe the Reverend Pimp Daddy from Mo Money an apology because he was on to something. Okay, maybe Dudley is being a little slick. The Reverend was supposed to go ice skating with Julia and his son, but Dudley uses his powers to prevent the Reverend from getting there so he can have Julia all to himself. Well, geez, somebody isn't getting his wings. The Rev ain't no fool either, and lets Dudley know that there will be no laying of any hands on his wife, and that Dudley should be on the first ark up out of his house. He even destroys Dudley's handbook, and I don't know if that like freed Dudley from breaking the rules or something, because he starts actively using his powers to help Rev and Julia. I mean, he really does give up the rules of trying to blend in, and even scares the literal hell out of Joe Hamilton to get him to go back to the church and face the people he's trying to evict. I like how they have Joe wearing red too. Definitely not a coincidence. There's around 20 or so minutes left in the movie, but it's fully dedicated to the final church sermon with every single person who had a part in the film in attendance. Even Joe Hamilton. It's periodically interrupted with scenes of Dudley reflecting on a job well done, and even this funny scene of him imagining himself being married to Julia instead. The ending really is just one feel-good moment after another, where they can tie everything up in a bow and have Joe Hamilton give them back their church. And it's a necessary character arc for Reverend Biggs, as unlike the beginning of the movie, he gives a deeply personal sermon right from the soul, and Julia does what she was put in this movie to do one last time, as they all forget about Dudley, since that was one of the rules once the job was done. All except the kid, that is. He's the only one who actually remembers Dudley, and the movie doesn't explain why that is. And since the handbook is destroyed, I'm guessing it's going to be up to interpretation. He's going to have issues down the line though if he keeps telling people this story. Let's get to the grade. The Preacher's Wife is a Hallmark movie with a bigger budget. That's the best way to describe it. It would be right at home with those other basic bare minimum Christmas movies on that channel. But don't take that as a bad thing. It's a movie that's only what it's supposed to be. No more or no less. A feel-good Christmas movie that you can watch every year with the family and sing along to. That's exactly how most people view The Preacher's Wife. Even though Denzel and Courtney B. Vance act circles around everybody else, Whitney Houston pretty much makes the movie with her excellent singing. The biggest issue with the movie was that it just had way too many plots going on at once. I don't know if Penny Marshall went out of her way to try to make it as different as the original as possible, or she just felt the need to include every issue plaguing the black community into one movie. Whatever the reason, it all ended up getting in the way of what the movie is actually about, and forced the actors to basically save it with their acting. I truly believe that making it a musical might have actually made the movie better. It's risky and always a hard sell, but I think it would have made the story flow better. Either way, despite the heavy subject matter, The Preacher's Wife is a decent little holiday movie with fantastic music and several good messages throughout. My grade for The Preacher's Wife is a C-. It won't really get you in the spirit all that much, but there's enough here to at least make you smile. And that's it for this episode of the BlackTrack. As usual, let me know what you thought about the movie The Preacher's Wife in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tell your friends about my channel. This year was a great year for the BlackTrack, and I hope you guys stick around for next year for more greatness and more BlackTracks. And until next year, I'll holler at you.